Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Barbies.
Welcome, everybody, to the Life Plus God podcast. My name is Alyssa Robinson, and I will be your Barbie host today. And we are joined by Reverend Gracie, Millard, and Jacob Zachariah to answer the question, can we learn about God from the Barbie movie? So this is a very special episode because this was requested by the Treach Podcast Discussion Group. They meet every Sunday at 11 a.m. and they talk about all sorts of podcasts. Life Plus God is one of the ones that they cover. Oh. But they specifically asked, hey, I wish Life Plus God would talk about the Barbie movies. So I hope y'all are listeing and enjoing and maybe even have a discussion about this
dedicated to you guys.
Here we are.
Yeah. So I wish that I could tell you exactly why I chose Gracie and Jacob to do this episode with me. And really the only reason is because we are fanatics of the Barbie movie. We all absolutely awesome. Loved it.
The people in your life who talked about it most, maybe.
Yeah, it was really cool. I enjoyed watching it a lot. It was a really funny movie and just the concepts were funny and I just enjoyed watching it. It was a good time.
So today, what we're going to talk about are some of the spiritual themes or biblical themes that we saw in the Barbie movies. I want to give a warning. This episode is nothing but spoiler alerts, like beginning to end. And so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you're planning to, maybe hit pause, come back to this episode at a different time. Yeah.
Okay,
waiting for it to come out to streaming, okay?
Okay, maybe that's it.
It's been out for over 2 months at this point, so
I'm not going to judge anyone.
Okay, I'm just throwing it out there.
But
Gracie's house is not made of glass, apparently. So
yeah,
she's fine.
If you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to see the movie, I suggest that you stick around anyways, because this episode might make you want to see the movie and see if you see the same themes that we did. But I kind of want to start out at the very beginning of the movie. We are in Barbie Land. And Barbie Land can be described as like this utopia where women are in charge and nothing's going wrong. And it's this, they call it the Dreamland. It's Barbie Dreamland. Or is it called Barbie Land?
I think it's Barbie Land.
Okay.
But it's just all...
It's her dream house.
Dream house.
It's all Barbie dream houses.
Thank you.
Yes.
And the beach, of course.
Yeah. So I've read a lot of articles comparing Barbie Land to the Garden of Eden, which I think is really interesting and I think worth having a conversation about. So I just wanted to hear some of your thoughts on like the opening of the movie being in Barbie Land and if you see some like resemblances to that Genesis story of the Garden of Eden.
I think especially the very beginning I'm remembering is where the kids are playing with dolls, right? Like that's the very beginning of the movie is where they're like playing with the old dolls and then Barbie appears.
Yeah.
And so that to me, it felt like everyone just looking and being like, oh man, what is that? And just like majesty. They were all just in awe of this beauty that they were seeing.
Let there be light.
Yeah, exactly. So in this situation, they were there already, but they were like seeing, oh, this is the light that we've all been waiting for.
I had forgotten that's how it really completely starts.
Yeah.
Because the Planet of the Apes like comparison is basically what they're doing there, right? That's how the beginning was.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking about how like in Barbie Land, there is this perception that everything is perfect and nothing can go wrong. And I think that that's how we like to think of like the Garden of Eden before the fall is like everything was exactly how it should be and there was no shame and there was no worry and everything just fell into place perfectly.
There was kind of like a naivete sort of like they're not aware of anything that's going wrong.
Yeah.
It is perceived like how they want us to see is like it's perfect there, but then we like see that in this quote unquote perfect existence, there's some problems going on.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think it's this idea of it's very shallow. Like, you don't have to think about it. Everything is rote, routine. Everything happens the exact same way
Everything's
every
in its
single
place.
day.
Nothing's amiss.
Yeah.
Everything is like ready to go to happen the exact same way every day.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's what the Garden of Eden was supposed to be like or not, but what we learn in the Barbie movie is that perfection is interrupted by thoughts of death. And so Barbie basically starts having like this existential crisis because she starts having thoughts of her own mortality and thoughts of death. And so I'm like, okay, where does this come in to the Eden story?
Yeah, so like I was thinking in terms of is like a self-realization for her, just sort of like how they became aware of, Adam and Eve became aware of themselves being in their nakedness kind of thing, right? Where they all of a sudden are seeing, hey, something is not like, this is not who I thought I was. This is not the life I thought I was living. And that's her waking up in the realization of not just death, but then she like got cellulite and all that kind of stuff, like all the stuff that started to happen to her. You know, that realization for her is sort of the realization that Adam and Eve were having as well when they ate the fruit.
Mm-hmm. Once she has this realization, I feel like this is kind of where we step away from the Bible narrative a little bit.
So it's not a direct comparison, I guess.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this perfection starts to feel like monotony, where before she was having like no worries, no problems. Everything went exactly how it was supposed to. Now, all of a sudden, everything's going wrong. The day-to-day routine is getting monotonous. It's boring. Like, she's wondering if there's more. And not necessarily within the Garden of Eden theme, but I think that is a faith journey that a lot of us go through of like, once we start going past the surface level of our faith foundations, we start asking the big questions that we realize there aren't answers to. And we kind of enter into this existential crisis, kind of like what Barbie did, where it's like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Everything that I thought this was turns out there's way more that I don't understand.
Sounds like deconstruction to me. I mean, just hearing you just describe that right now, it sounds like deconstruction. She was deconstructing her idea of the world that she was living in. She had an idea of like, hey, this is how my life goes. And then all of a sudden one thing goes awry and then she's like, oh, hold on. What's going on with this? Well, why is this happening now?
Well, and I think, so when we go from, so she's having all of this dread, existential dread, and then we meet Weird Barbie. The most amazing Barbie.
The best Barbie.
The best Barbie.
Yes.
We meet Weird Barbie. And it's funny. I saw an interview with Kate McKinnon, and she had been talking about how she had a conversation with Greta Gerwig about, like, if she's going to be Weird Barbie, she wants to be naked. Because she said, which is going back to Garden of Eden, okay?
Yeah.
No, she said, every little girl who had a Weird Barbie, it never had clothes on, ever. And I was like, it didn't. Like,
or it was
haircut, colored all over,
Yeah.
no clothes. Like, but Greta had to tell her, it's not that kind of movie. But I thought that was really funny. So we meet Weird Barbie, Weird Barbie is the Barbie that got played with a little too hard. And she's kind of been introduced to the harsh realities of the world and what really happens when everything's not perfect like you thought it was. And so I was kind of thinking of Weird Barbie. So I was reading some like philosophies and themes around the movie. And one of the things that they talked about is Weird Barbie and Alan, who we'll talk about later.
Love Alan.
Yeah. They are the true heroes of the story. It's not Barbie and Ken that are heroes of the story. It's Weird Barbie and Alan who are the heroes of the story. And they are the outcasts, they are the marginalized, and they are the people who are willing to challenge the status quo. And I thought that was really interesting. And so when I was thinking of Weird Barbie and Alan, who did I think of from the Bible?
The prophets?
The prophets. Yeah.
Of course.
So I was thinking, oh
The
my
one
gosh.
who literally has weird as part of her name.
Yeah.
They all called her Weird Barbie.
Yeah, I'm seeing visions of Elijah.
Yeah. Weird Elijah. They're all
Yeah.
like, mm.
So she goes to Weird Barbie, and Weird Barbie, it's kind of like biting into. I'm mixing all of these metaphors from scripture and from my personal faith journey, but just roll with it. It's kind of like the
usually
metaphor
do.
of like biting the apple and receiving wisdom and knowledge. She offers her either the stiletto or the Birkenstock.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
I felt personally victimized as I was wearing my Birkenstocks the first time I watched the movie. I was like,
Stephanie wore her pink Birkenstocks
Well,
to the
there
movie.
you go.
Yeah, so
mine were brown like Bart. And I was like, nobody look at my feet.
I am
So
curious, though,
you're-
do a lot of people wear stilettos to movie theaters?
That is also,
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. But of
in
all
Dallas
shoes,
they do.
I guess so.
So Gracie is Weird Barbie. I am also Weird Barbie. And spoiler alert, Jacob identifies as Alan.
Alan.
Yeah, which we'll learn a little bit about Alan later. So she offers up to Barbie and says, the only way that you can stop this existential crisis is to find the kid who plays with you and figure out what's wrong with him or her. Because that's the thought of whatever's happening in the real world and the feelings that the one who is playing with the Barbie is having trickles into the Barbie world in one way or another. And so she puts this challenge to Barbie and says, hey, you can either pick the stiletto and go back to the way things were, or you can choose the Birkenstock and learn, where all of this is coming from and kind of reason with your existential dread. And what does Barbie choose?
she's forced to choose the Birkenstock.
But she chooses the heel.
She tried to Jonah it at
yeah.
first. She tried to be Jonah.
I know.
She's like,
She
no, I
did.
don't want
She
to.
did.
I don't want to do
I
that.
know. And I was thinking about that and like, how many times do we choose comfort over going out into the world and taking on a challenge?
Oh, that is my MO.
Yeah.
that is like, I'll choose retreat. I'll just rather not. rather not.
And I also think that in a way, without the utopia, like the church with a capital C has become like Barbie land of like, la, 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 la. We're going to pretend we're not feeling this existential dread.
Everything is perfect. Everything is going exactly as it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
Right. There
Yeah.
are no problems.
There are no problems. Everything is good.
Or it's not
Keep
as bad.
smiling.
It's not
Yeah.
as bad as people are saying it is.
Yeah.
Don't listen to that. That's just negative talk and trying to bring you down.
Yeah. And there's kind of this option of like, hey, you can choose the stiletto or you can choose the Birkenstock. Go on your deconstruction journey. Kind of dig into what your faith really is. Like, what do you believe? What are some of the things that you grew up with that you can let go of? And I would say the majority of the church wants you to choose the stiletto. They want you to say, no, you know what? I'm not going to go on that Birkenstock journey.
And I wouldn't say like, that's not just this church. I would say like that's the idea of organized religion is they don't really want you to have to question it necessarily in terms of, hey, we're telling you what to do. Just go ahead and keep doing what we're telling you to do. This is what you're supposed to do. We're giving you the instructions. Follow instructions.
Yeah. So when I say, sorry, I was using some tribal language, I guess. When I say church with a capital C, I mean universal church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm including like all denominations, all faith practices within the realm of Christianity, but like the actual church institution.
I don't think it's just Christianity related though. I'm saying I think that's like across religions. Like every organized religion wants you to follow the organizational structure of the religion.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
To choose the Birkenstock, which she didn't choose. She was forced into it.
Yes.
Which
We all know that feeling too.
Yes. I was not planning to go on this journey, but here I am
Right.
on this journey. So she had to let go of materialism and comfort to go out into the world and explore and figure out who she really is. And I just realized that we have been talking this whole time and have not once mentioned Ken and how relevant to the plot of the movie. Poor Ken.
Ken hasn't come up yet. Ken's just around.
Well, he has
Sure.
come up in the movie, but we ignore him. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so she's going on this journey into the real world, and then Ken is a stowaway. And he decides to come with her, and she wanted to do it on her own, but he snuck into the back of the car, and now he is on this journey with her into the real world from Barbie Land. And so they're on this mission together. So I think that the whole theme of like the first act of this movie, or the first scene, whatever it would be called, is finding purpose. Leaving Barbie Land, I'm called to step outside of my comfort zone, called to do something that I never expected that I would be doing. And I'm just wondering, like, going outside of the Barbie movie in your personal lives, is there any time that you've had that feeling of like, oh, it's time to step outside of Barbie Land?
I think I have an easy answer in that I went to seminary and they kind of forced you to do that in your first year.
They gave you a set of Birkenstocks in year one.
No, I came with my own. But they did force you to ask. There's one class where it was just completely taking down everything you thought. So it was basically deconstructing but also reconstructing. But I mean, throughout seminary and since going into ministry, every time it was especially so in seminary where like it was constantly new information and being like, okay, well, what do you do here? What do you do with, empire? What do you do with racism? What do you do with all? And, but then practicing ministry, it's like kind of similar of like things. You can't control who walks in the doors and who's, asks what question. And so it's constantly being thrown at like, well, what do you do? And how am I supposed to respond to this?
And you could choose to just retreat back into the foundation or the fundamentalism that faith can present of just like, okay, well, I don't want to do that work. Yeah. Like that's too much.
I'll just go ahead and do what has always been done.
Yeah.
Because that's what's easiest and that's what people will not resist.
Falling back on old habits. And
right.
Stuff. Exactly.
Yeah. But this new perspective is calling me to do something different, but I don't really want to do it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, so Jacob, obviously I know you very well.
Yes.
Right?
Sure.
So one of the things that if y'all don't know, Jacob is my partner.
Hello.
It's out.
Oops.
So one of the things that I was thinking of for you is like you choosing to become an attorney. Like that was not a part of your life plan.
Yeah, I was supposed to go to medical school and then I guess in my junior year of college, I was like, oh man, chemistry is not fun. I don't like science. I was like ministering to people, like helping people. That sounds like a good idea. And like helping heal people, that sounds fun. But the whole science part of this is not my game. I don't really want to be a part of that game.
Yeah, but I think that, I'm telling your story for you. So do you not want me to tell it?
No.
Okay. But like, I think that there was a lot of conflict there in terms of like, there were expectations put upon you by your family. There was a lot that like you were carrying of like maybe this is wrong, but never in your wildest dreams did you consider becoming an attorney. Like that wasn't part of the plan.
No, it wasn't part of the plan. And even then, right? So like even after it did become part of the plan of, I guess, April of my senior year in college is when I figured out I'm going to law school. So that was a great time to figure that out.
Yeah, very convenient.
And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'll go to law school, but I don't really want to go to this place, and I don't really want to go to this place. But if anybody knows anything about applying to school, April before you try to get into school is not the best time. You don't have a lot of options left available to you. And so I do go to law school. And then after I graduate, my thought was I'd never want to go to the border. So I'm from Houston, Texas. I will tell you guys that right now. I love Houston, Texas. And so growing up in Houston, I was like, I don't want to go to the border as a job. I never want to have to work on the border. I don't want to prosecute on the border. It's just too much stuff going on over there. And then my second least favorite place to go to was Dallas. I was like, I don't want to ever move to Dallas. I was like, those are the two places, God. I just really want a job. I really would like to be employed. I'm very much in debt right now. Having some money would be great. But I don't want to go to these two places. And I think Alyssa's trying to get me to talk about it, but I have a tattoo on my finger, and the tattoo on my finger is Matthew 26:39, which is God in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane talking to his dad, just being like, I don't want to do this. Like, please let this cup pass for me. But then ultimately it's, okay, whatever is your will, I guess I'll just go ahead and do that then.
And then what did God do?
God first sent me to Laredo, where I was a prosecutor in Laredo for 9 months. And then when I was in Laredo, I don't know if you know much about Laredo, there's not a lot to do there. It's basically fishing and go eat at Luby's. That's about it. And so I'd work and go to Luby's because we weren't ever allowed to cross the border because that was against our code of conduct working for the DA's office down there. And then from there, I got an interview for the Dallas County DA's office.
Well,
and here
there
I
you
go. So then I didn't want to take the interview. And my supervisor down there, he had already been in Dallas before. And so he was like, hey, like, I know you don't want to go to Dallas, but you really need to go because being down here in Laredo, you're gonna flounder. You're gonna flounder. You're not gonna have anything to flourish with. And so I took the interview, got the job a few months later, and moved out here. And I haven't moved. It's been a decade since then, so I've been out here. So
see, it's not so bad.
It's not so bad, but also Houston is still better in my mind. Like the food is better.
We'll have to disagree on
That's
that.
fair.
But
That's fair.
I don't
okay.
know if I disagree, honestly.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
after visiting Houston, like
The
Houston's
food
pretty
is
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
The food is awesome, and water is very close by. A whole beach. Very
so
close by.
Houston's your Barbie land.
Yes.
That you were forced out of.
It was.
God handed you your Birkenstocks and said, you're going to Laredo.
I really tried to keep my stilettos on, though. is the
Yeah.
problem.
And so here we are, finding purpose. We're leaving Barbie land. We're going into the real world. Oh, should I share mine?
Yeah.
Yeah, you asked
You made us do it.
I know.
Be vulnerable,
That's one
please.
of
Thank you.
That's one of the benefits of being the host.
Yes, but you being vulnerable is important now. Please. Thank you.
Yeah, you're there who they listen to most. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I've shared my same story a million times, but
I've never heard it before. Please go ahead
leaving
and share.
Barbie land for me was definitely my divorce. I thought that the world worked a certain way. And I think that one of the things that you see in Barbie land that I'd be really interested to talk about a little bit, that I think a lot of us go through this stage of life is dualistic thinking. Something's either good or bad. Something's perfect or imperfect. Something is
The right thing or the wrong thing.
the right thing or the wrong thing. Exactly. And so I was a very dualistic thinker. And so in my mind, whether I was happy or not in my marriage doesn't matter. I made a vow and my spouse made a vow. And so my thought was we were on the same page in terms of this value system of we both made a vow and we are going to stick to that for better or for worse. And turns out that was not his value system. And less than 3 years in, he was like, no, I don't want to do this. Turns out there was an affair in the mix, all sorts of stuff. But that kicked me off big time into existential crisis. So I guess I didn't choose my Birks either. They were thrust upon me.
I think that God came in the middle of the night and put them on your feet.
Yeah.
And you're like, where did my stilettos go?
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing is that looking back on it, that is one of the best things that's happened for my life. I really had this going through that divorce. I love the person I am now more than I've ever loved myself. I love my life. I am super close with my family and my friends, and that's stuff that I didn't have before to the same level that I have now. But if you had asked me at the time what I wanted, I would have said the stilettos. I would have said, I want to stay married. But God is like, hey, you can get around in these Birks, and you'll get around faster and your feet will be more comfortable.
And you'll get used to that, the Birks being on your feet and like having Birks on your feet.
Yeah,
You just have to trust me on this one.
Yeah. But I think that it was leaving Barbie Land and realizing, going from dualistic thinking of something's right or something's wrong to there's a lot of complexity. Like there's a lot of gray area. And the more work that I did, the more forgiving I became of him, because I was able to, in therapy, access empathy for him of like, imagine, because one of the hurtful things that he said to me that I didn't understand is, I never wanted to marry you. Very hurtful, right? Like something, yeah. But what I was able to work through in therapy is, imagine what he was feeling and experiencing being married to someone that he never wanted to marry in the first place. Now, he's not off the hook. Of course, he should have vocalized that, should have had a conversation, shouldn't have let this happen. But how much misery would he have been in of like sharing his home and his life with this person that he didn't even want to be around every single day? And so like there was an empathy for that, and being able to look at it from a bird's eye view and say, it's not me personally. Like I'm a lovable person, and that's work I had to do is like I had because there was a time I did not feel like I was a lovable person. If my husband can't love me, who can,
Right.
And so there was a lot of work that I had to do and say, despite what he thinks or believes, I am a lovable person. And that gave me even more empathy for him of like, he couldn't manage to love a lovable person, And so it just, it created all of these complexities and gray areas that just keep snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And you start to see the world differently, and you don't see the world as black and white anymore. And I think that if we move on to like Barbie entering the real world, I think there were some rude awakenings she had that it's not black and white.
Oh yeah, when she went to the school.
Yeah, like let's talk about some of those experiences that she had. When she got thrust into the real world.
Well, it's not only not black and white, it's like the opposite of Barbie Land in her experience. Like one of my favorite scenes is her, I guess she's agitated for some reason immediately upon arrival, and she's like, I need some good feminine energy. Oh, there's a construction site. Yeah. Like runs over to them.
Don't go there, please.
Right. So that's like the first thing that I think of, and she's so confused as to why they're talking to her the way that they are, and
catcalling doesn't happen in Barbie Land.
Right, it does not apparently, and it's usually apparently women are the ones doing the jackhammering and all that. So
yeah, and I think that even before she gets there, just the feeling, the feeling that she has of the world is like. So you were talking about I don't remember. Oh, the nakedness and the shame and the being seen. So that's one of the things that someone aligned with. Ken and Barbie enter this real world together, and all of a sudden they feel exposed. They feel
and
like
very
they're being
insecure.
Yes, they're being looked at. They're being seen in a new way, and it brings on shame, and it brings on all of these negative feelings, self-consciousness. I don't know what this is, but I'm very conscious, but
only
myself.
of myself.
But so it brings all of this on, and they're like, okay, this is the continuation of the Eden story, and realizing what's actually happening in the world. Because Barbie had this idea that the real world was just
a reflection
an
of
extension.
Extension, exactly.
Maybe that Barbie Land was an extension of the real world.
Sure.
And so however wonderful Barbie Land was, the real world would be even better, because Barbie Land is just a reflection of the real world, which wasn't the case at all. It turns out that Barbie Land is the daydream of the real world, of what it could be. And so she talks about how, like, I feel like I'm being stared at and there's an undertone of violence.
That was such a good line.
Yeah. And then what does Ken say?
Ken was saying something like he's like, I don't see that.
I feel
He's
powerful.
like,
I feel
I'm
powerful.
being looked at, but there's no violence at all. It's just powerful and respected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They admire me.
Yeah. And so it's this introduction to my favorite word, the patriarchy.
yes. The patriarchy.
It took us a long time to get to that word.
I know. So introduction of the patriarchy. And I kind of want to stop here for a little bit because I think that this realization between like trying to reconcile between the Barbie land and the real world, I think that it's a lot of what we go through with the church of like, we grow up in this loving, embracive community as children. Hopefully, if you grew up in the church, that was your experience. For a lot of people, it wasn't, and that makes me really sad. But if you were a child in the church, usually your experience is loved, provided for, like nurtured by the community, all of these things. And then we grow up and we realize that there's a lot of negativity in the church. There's a lot of evil and judgment and all of these things within the church. And so we're trying to figure out, like, there's this conflict between what we know it should be and what it actually is. And I think that that's where the existential crisis begins of like, I know what the church should be. Why isn't it that way?
And that's Barbie going through being like, hey, like, I don't understand. Barbie land is supposed to be a reflection or of the real world. And she gets into that realization of like, why isn't it this way? That's so tough for her to like reconcile those concepts. And I'm imagining it would have been tough for Adam and Eve too, to reconcile the idea of, wait a minute, I've been living in this dream state this whole time. And now it's been yanked from me through my own actions or whatever. Right. But it's been yanked from me. And now I have to come to terms with what I thought was true about the world that I live in is not true. So now they have to come up with a whole fresh concept of the world they live in. That's a scary thing to have to do.
But I think that that's work that all of us are called to do.
Sure.
At some point in time, as like, you know, we talk about all the time how important it is to put faith foundations in place for our children. And that when we're teaching these faith foundations at an age appropriate level, it is very black and white. It is like, Jesus loves you. You are forgiven. You're to love everybody. Like all of the staple messaging, but we don't really address the intricate details.
So, I mean, in my head, the reason for that, though, is so that when as we get older and we start to encounter these harsh realities of what our churches are, then we sort of need something to fall back on. And like you sort of remember, okay, well, at my foundation, I know Jesus loves me. At my foundation, I know treat people right. At my foundation, I know love everybody, right? That's what I can always fall back on in terms of this is what I'm called to do, is be this person. And reconciling that with what you're actually experiencing in your day-to-day life is tough. But like, if you can get to that point, you can survive it a little bit easier.
I also think it opens our eyes to our own inadequacies and where we've messed up. And I think that that's one of the things. So I was reading some like philosophies and theories around the Barbie movie, and it talked about how Barbie and Ken both go on opposite but equal journeys of self-discovery.
Right.
Okay. And so they're each on this journey of self-discovery, and it's very easy to look at it and maybe from my perspective say, well, Barbie went on the good path and Ken went on the bad path and decided to bring patriarchy to Barbie land.
Can we, for a second, take an aside to define patriarchy so that we're not thinking the wrong idea?
Yes.
So that listeners can understand what we mean by patriarchy.
Yes. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, I just want to differentiate patriarchy from shaming, from like that it's I think a lot of people have that's a trigger word. Thank you. Because they think, oh, well, when she says patriarchy, she's about to go on a feminist rant. But it's just that the concept
and
that
she is.
I mean, that's fair. Just that patriarchy is a system. It's not a person. It's not putting the blame on individual men, but it's saying this is a system in which men have more power politically in any sense, really. It's not blaming it on individual men and saying, you're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem. But it's the system in which we have lived.
Yeah. And as we dig deeper into this conversation, thank you for saying that, Gracie, because one of the things that we'll talk about is how the system of patriarchy is damaging to both men and women. This is not something where, women are the only victims and men are the oppressors and, we should be man-hating. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. It's recognizing the system that we live in. And I think that's one of the things that the movie did really well is holding a mirror up to our society and saying, hey, take a look at what we represent. What if someone who is completely alien to the way that this world functions, because almost every societal structure in our world, with just a few exceptions, is patriarchal. So if someone came in and this was not the system that they grew up in, how would they react to that system?
And Barbie does, sort of show how someone would react. Someone who doesn't understand the concepts, the concept does not exist for her, right? So she's just trying to reconcile the idea of how can this be possible? Why is it this way? And you're right, because she is that alien who just has not seen this before and is like, what do I do now? Like, why is this happening?
And it's so upsetting. It's so upset. She can't understand why. When she's meeting with the Mattel people, she said, "Well, okay, can I speak with the CEO? Where is she?" And then
presuming
it's a boardroom of men.
Yeah, she just assumes that it's going to be the woman in charge, and they're all like, "Oh, we all know and love women, but there are no women in here."
We all have mothers.
Right. Yeah. But it makes so walking through that system of patriarchy and what that means, it also makes me think of how spirituality became religion, because religion seems to be more of a system, while spirituality seems to be more of a connection, a seeking of God. And so I almost feel like that's what Jesus did. Not to say Barbie is Jesus, but Jesus was like an alien among us who came to this earth, saw all of the religious systems in place, and was like, I don't understand why y'all are doing it this way. Like, y'all just aren't getting it. Like, this isn't what it's all about. It wasn't supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
And then what do? We take the teachings of Jesus and then we create a religious system around it. That was... I mean, I could go on and on about
he
that.
does call the church into existence, but it maybe was supposed to look different than how it does look in most cases.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So now I want to shift over to a second. So we've been talking about Barbie's perspective this whole time. It is the Barbie movie.
Yes.
Right.
But I want to talk a little bit about Ken's perspective and rewinding a little bit, because when we enter from the Barbie world into the real world, I think that the biblical theme that we're seeing is sinful nature. And I think that I was starting to say, it's very easy to say Ken is on the bad path, Barbie's on the good path. Ken is sinful, Barbie is, virtuous, whatever it is that you want to define it. But I think that what we're really seeing when we take a look at Ken and we try to have empathy for what Ken is experiencing, when he was in Barbie land, he felt completely minimized,
marginalized,
ignored, belittled.
Yep.
His value only came from when
Barbie paid
Barbie's
attention to him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
you could say it's condescending,
Mhm.
like in all sorts of ways. Like looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, he suffered, and the Kens suffered in Barbie Land. Maybe not under threat of violence,
Sure.
but I think that any person that you ask who, as a child, felt ignored, they will tell you, like, those are deeply rooted wounds that go with you. And so as we step into the real world, we see Ken and Barbie going on these opposite journeys. And what Ken is learning is, I'm worth something. I'm worthy of love. I am important. I should be respected.
Yeah.
So these are all positive things for him to learn about himself,
Right.
that were taken to maybe an unhealthy extreme.
Right.
Mojo Dojo Casa House comes to mind. But Barbie, on the other hand, is for the first time shedding her dualism. And I think that that's what we learn Barbie's sin is that she saw things as very black and white, right and wrong. You know, every night is girls' night. You know, I'm not going to compromise. This is the way things are. And how destructive that was for Ken.
Ken felt like a neglected person. Like he was neglected as a child, theoretically, right? He's a neglected child who all of a sudden went off to college and had freedoms in his world. And he saw a world through a different way where people were paying attention to him and people wanted to know what he thought and how he felt and were really interested in him in general. And so the thought that I had with him was, yeah, he definitely took it to a bad place in effect, right? But he went from a place of being ignored and neglected to a place where he felt powerful and strong and seen. And you can understand why he would go that way, because it was a place where he was feeling appreciated. It was a place where he was feeling welcomed, right? And so like I can think of, if you're in an unwelcome or unstable place, when you get to that stable place, you don't know how you're going to react necessarily. You want to say, you know what, I'm going to be the best version of myself. But sometimes people go power hungry, right? Sometimes people just go nuts when they get to that next place because they're like, oh my God, look at all the things I can do. I can do all these crazy things now. And I have freedom and I have money and I have no parents telling me what to do, right? And so that's what him going to the real world, to me, it felt like going to college is what it felt like, honestly. Like going from a place where I was under my mom's roof, where I had a curfew, where I had like, you can't do this, you can't do that. This is a specific prescribed way of living, not the neglected part necessarily, but like just this is the prescribed way you're going to live, to my whole world opened up to me when I got to college. And so that's what that felt like, watching Ken go to the library and grab all these books. And he was just like, this is incredible. What is this? That's what it felt like to me, watching him experience it.
Yeah.
Books about trucks.
Yeah.
Well, and it makes me, so when they are each going on this separate path, one of the things that they're both experiencing, which again, like so many spiritual connections, is the loss of innocence. And the way they react to that loss of innocence is very different. For Barbie, her loss of innocence of, oh, this isn't the way the real world is, turns to fear, depression, feeling jaded, like nothing I do will make a difference. And for Ken, his loss of innocence turned into greed and ego, and which is also another way of being jaded, of like, I can take control over this, and I can take control over other people to make myself feel good, because what he really wants is not an unworthy goal. He just wants to keep feeling that feeling of being important and being valued
And empowered.
and everybody wants that.
Sure.
Everybody wants to feel that. So he decides, you know what? This patriarchy thing makes me feel good. I'm going to take this back to Barbie Land. And he does.
And it makes sense though too, because he is feeling a way, and in that moment, honestly, I thought he was also showing empathy, because he was thinking about, man, all these other Kens don't know, like they don't know that the patriarchy exists. Let me show them that they can also feel empowered and feel more than what they are right now. And so, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? But at the same time, for him, it was, wow, look at this, how you can feel. You can feel good too, Kens. Because, I think I remember at the beginning of the movie when he was trying to get Barbie's attention, Margot Robbie Barbie, like the main Barbie's attention, all the other Kens were also trying to get attention, right? It was all the Kens just trying to get attention from the Barbies in their lives and feeling ignored and feeling neglected. And he was like, I can make you guys feel great too.
Yeah, I want to share this feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not immoral feeling to have. It's how you go about
enacting it.
And that it came from a broken system anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
That like in an ideal world, like there wouldn't be a system in place that would make any one group of people feel that way.
Yeah.
So if they're being neglected, then they do need to be lifted up, but the other people also may need to be brought down a little bit.
Well, but it also makes me think of our own sinful nature in that the motivations that we assign to people, because I think that the majority of people are more like Ken, of like, all I want is to feel loved and valued and appreciated and respected. And I'm just trying to find a way to feel that way. And so sometimes it comes out as lashing out. Sometimes it comes out as manipulation. Sometimes it comes out in just a plethora of negative ways. And we have to learn how to feel those feelings in positive ways. And I think that for us in our faith journey, that's where we turn to God and we turn to Jesus's teachings and say, hey, how do we embrace these fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. I can't do one and not do all of them. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. How can we feel in the spirit of these fruits and without hurting others, without taking advantage of others, without lording over others, And I just think that Barbie and Ken both were working with what they had. And maybe they had a very limited tool set to chase those feelings that we all want.
I mean, because they didn't really have to, right? So like if I'm thinking, I'm sorry, I'm going back to Adam and Eve, right? But when you eat the fruit and then all of a sudden you have the knowledge of self-realization and actualization or whatever, you recognize who you are, you don't have the tools to really understand it yet, right? You're still just like, I'm just thinking as the first time as a baby sees their hand, right? The first time a dog catches their tail or something, right? It's just like, what do I do now?
Right.
That's funny.
It's true. Yeah. You have no idea what you're supposed to do with the information that you now have.
Yeah. So what Ken does is he takes this patriarchal structure and he says, I'm going to take this back to Barbie Land and I'm going to tell the other Kens so that they can feel as good as I feel right now. And Barbie hasn't gone back to Barbie Land yet. She meets up with the girl who's playing with her, and there's this whole mother-daughter connection with America Ferrera and I don't know the actor's name, but I know the daughter's name is Sasha. And so connecting with them. And I think that one of the many defining moments in Barbie is her first interaction with her creator, Ruth Handler. Yeah. And so I think about, so Ken is off doing his thing and instilling the patriarchy at Barbie Land. And Barbie is trying to figure out, like, what's even going on here? I don't understand this. So, like, why is everything so upside down? And so it's just absolute chaos. She's running from Mattel, who's trying to put her back in a box. She's like, doesn't understand why this is a boardroom of men when Barbie Land is supposed to be all about the girls, all this stuff. And she runs into Ruth Handler, who is the creator. So I'm going to equate Ruth Handler to God. And their first interaction, I think, is it's so interesting because when I think about it, like, it comes out of nowhere. She walks into this room that's set up as like a 1940s kitchen. We don't really know who Ruth Handler is, what she's doing there, like, what is this space that I've walked into? it's confusing. It's mysterious. Like Ruth speaks very cryptically, and we don't really know what's going on. And I think that for me, that feels like our first true encounter with the divine. Like when I think of times that I have felt extremely connected to God, it has always felt mysterious and confusing, mystical. It's calming, like all of these feelings. And so for me, that really stands out of like a relatable moment in spirituality.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I agree that, our experience is that because, we each have different ways that even if we don't necessarily realize it in the moment of where we've interacted with a divine energy, right? Like but that first time afterwards is when you don't realize until afterwards. You go back and you think about it and you're like, oh man, what was that interaction? And what I'm reminded of is another part in that movie where she sits down at the bus bench with the older lady, and she tells the older lady that you're beautiful. Barbie tells the older lady that you're beautiful, and she goes, I know. Right? That's that response of, and Barbie didn't really know how to take it in that moment. And I think that she realizes it later when she repeats that line, like someone tells her you're so beautiful, and she then says, I know later on. Right? But that mentality of you don't know necessarily what the interaction was until you have time to process it later on.
Mm-hmm. But I also think that scene is like the learning that you are lovable.
Yeah.
And that each of us needs to have that self-value and realize like we are lovable children of God. And that's the feeling that woman brings is like, I know I'm loved. I know I'm a child of God. And for Barbie to get to interact with her, someone who has so much confidence in who they are, she smiled and it brought a tear to her eye just being in contact with someone who felt that way. And it kind of makes me feel like how we can be the light of Christ to others. Maybe I'm stretching this out.
No, so I felt like that, or it felt to me like a parent's love of being like, this is how a representation, like an older person's representation. So as you're a kid, Barbie's a kid having that first interaction with the divine. And then it's somebody who's already been on this journey for a while and you encounter them on the path and they're like, yeah, I know. I know. And so then you're like, oh, okay, that's what I can get there too if I just keep working down this path.
That's a really good point. It's a good scene too.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Barbie Land, shall we?
All right.
Okay. So we go back to Barbie Land. And
where things are not okay. I said where things are not okay.
All is not well in Barbie Land.
Ken has brought patriarchy in and they loved it. Kens did. And so all of a sudden you see that the Kens are running things and they have the Barbies now as the cheerleaders and as the people bringing them their beers. And
subjugated is the word I was thinking.
There you go. Yes, exactly. The dream houses have been usurped by the Kens and turned into the Mojo Dojo Casa houses. And chaos ensues.
Yeah. And I think so. It's basically, and it's a farce, right? Like it's all of the most stereotypical representations of this system of patriarchy. So it is kind of going back to the dualism of like, okay, we went from this extremely complex world, and it actually makes me think of like in the real world when Ken is asking for a job at this company and the guy's like, oh, well, you need a master's degree, you need this, you need that. And Ken says, you're not doing patriarchy very well. And the man's response is, oh, no, we're doing it well. It's just we're flying under the radar, you know? And it just highlights like the complexities and the intricacies. And it was kind of laughing at this idea of the system. But then with the lack of understanding of complexity, we take it and we turn it right back into dualism. And I think that we do that with our faith all the time. We have these complex experiences of God. And we were actually talking about this in the break room today, and like translations of the Bible and how books were written and things like that is the Bible is a collection of stories, and some of those stories are mystical experiences of God. I think of Moses in the burning bush. Absolutely mystical experiences of God that then we take and try to turn into a verbalization, which is nearly impossible. And that kind of feels like the translation of real world patriarchal structure taken and trying to fit it into the Barbie land model of dualism. Like you'll never see the richness of humanity and all that this world has to offer if you're only looking at it from the surface level. And all of the hope that is within the world, and that not everybody thinks this way, not everybody acts this way. But then we take that and we put it in a box, because that's what we like to do. We like to create constructs of religion, of society, of culture, of finance, of whatever. Name a topic. We want to create a construct around it. And that's what Ken has done. He's taken that and said, okay, black and white, here's what the patriarchy looks like.
It felt like, and for me, in that situation, what it felt like was, you see like the moon at night and you want to take a picture of the moon at night. And every time you take a picture of the moon at night on your phone, does it ever come out the way that you wanted it to?
Oh my gosh. You want to take a picture of every sunset.
Yes.
And
But
does it ever translate, you know?
It doesn't fit. And so then what you did was you have now this photograph, and then you try to show other people this photograph and say, hey, this is what I saw that night, but it's not the same, right? And so Ken's over here building the patriarchy off of a book that he stole from the library, a set of books he stole from the library. And so then he's not understanding it because he doesn't have the depth of having experienced the system. He just has the depth of reading about the system. But again, it's that same concept of an alien coming back and trying to explain the patriarchy to somebody else, and it gets lost in translation.
Yeah, all I know is that I felt really good when I was experiencing this in this place. So now I want to feel really good and bring it to this place. But what we learn is that it doesn't make him feel good, and it doesn't make the other Kens feel good. It makes them feel powerful, but does it really improve their relationships with Barbie? Does it give them what they really wanted, which is to feel loved and valued and accepted
By Barbie.
By Barbie, yes. But it doesn't turn into that. It just turns into very surface level living where they still secretly want the approval of Barbie.
Right. They still want the Barbies to love them and give them attention.
Yeah.
Because when Margot Robbie's Barbie doesn't, then everything goes awry again for him.
Barbie comes back to this world that is nothing like she's ever seen before in Barbie land. And she falls into depression, basically. So that was the path that we were talking about of her reaction to loss of innocence is going catatonic, basically. And so she's hauled up to Weird Barbie's house.
And Gloria and Sasha are with her.
Yes, Gloria and Sasha are with
to
her.
Barbie Land.
They've come to Barbie Land. So they go up to Weird Barbie's house, and of course, there's going to be a ton of the plot that I'm skipping. And Weird Barbie and Alan are there. And Alan, I want to talk about him for
Hooray,
a little
Alan.
bit. Hooray, Alan. He is one of my favorite characters in this movie. So when I think of Weird Barbie and Alan, I think of the perfect example of what it is to be an ally, like what it is to be a friend to somebody, and the perfect example of possibly the Good Samaritan, whatever it is that we want to call them. But this example that we can look to of like, even when people have wronged you, you want things to get better for them. And that's Alan. He's like, I don't like this world. I don't like the Kens behaving this way. And I don't think they like it either. Like, I don't think they want it to be this way. And he wants to change this world for everybody for the better.
So do you know who I don't think I've talked to you about this. Do you know who I see Alan as?
Who?
John the Baptist.
Oh,
Where
really?
he's sort of off on his own, and then he's like, guys, this is not how it should be. Let's try to fix this. Let's try to fix this. The better system is coming. Like, we don't need to have it this way. I don't like the Mojo Dojo Casa houses. This is not right, guys. This is not how it's supposed to be, right? That was John the Baptist going out there telling everybody, no, this is not, like, you guys are doing it wrong. You're not getting it. Like, okay, you're not going to listen to me, but I'm telling you, this is not how it's going to go. So that's how I always saw Alan.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Alan and Weird Barbie go on this pursuit of justice. And what it comes down to is you remembered the mom's name. I can't remember her name.
Gloria.
Gloria.
I just picked it from. I don't know if her name is ever actually said in the movie. I don't remember. But anyway.
I'm sure it is. But so the way that this system, and they almost talk about it as if it's like everyone's hypnotized by this patriarchal structure. But the way they break the system is Gloria giving this amazing speech about what it is to be a woman. And she's speaking of it in terms of her experience of the real world. And what she starts doing, and I wish I could just do the speech, but I can't. And I can't do it justice. So you're going to want to watch the movie just for this speech. It's one of those moments that is just very connecting. But what she's doing with this speech is she is breaking dualism. And she is introducing complexity to Barbie land of when you are a woman, and let's just say when you are a person, you can be experiencing 15 things at once, and they can all contradict each other.
Yeah.
And you can experience all that feeling all at the same time. And it feels impossible. And that's what breaks everybody out of this trance. And so I just have this, I made this note that to pursue justice in our Christian faith, it makes me think. I wrote down Micah 6:8, which is, what does God ask of you but to do justice, love kindness, and stay in love with God, basically. That's a paraphrase. But and so it's, what is my purpose? What am I made for? Is to do justice, love kindness, and stay in love with God. Or walk humbly with God, I think is the phrasing within the scripture. And it just makes me think of when we are pursuing justice as people of Christ, the very first step to that, it has to start with introspection and contemplation. You can't just, you can immediately go out and start doing and being in action. But if you really want it to be a connective experience, there has to be compassion. There has to be empathy. There has to be relationship, all things which require contemplation, or else it's just dualism of I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do and it's on my checklist and I'm going to do it and then I'm going to move on and do something else. Doing the good work is good. Right? But I think that sometimes we get caught up in doing the good work and not embracing the complexity of what we're doing.
I think that a lot of people, the best speeches you hear and the best messages you receive are from people who, one, have a strong understanding of what it is they're talking about, and then two, believe what they're talking about a lot of times, right? And so with that belief and understanding as your foundation, you can then go out and accomplish the things you need to accomplish, right? But when you go from a place of, I'm just going to do the rote things that I've been told to do, you don't necessarily have the belief as strongly as you do once you understand it well, and then go from there with the belief, right? If you're expressing yourself on a topic, if you really believe in it, and you really understand it, those are almost always going to be better than people who don't believe and don't understand. They're just repeating the words that they've memorized.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to be willing to experience it for yourself and go beyond what you've been taught, right?
Right.
You have to be willing to ask the questions and challenge the status quo. Back to our weird allies,
yes.
Weird Barbie and Weird Alan.
I guess he's Weird Ken.
Yeah, he's also Weird Ken. I think we're all just
because he wears Ken's clothes.
Yes.
He does.
They don't fit him the same, but he wears them.
He doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't get his own wardrobe.
I don't know, Gracie. What do you think? I know it's like got Richard Rohr written all over it, but what do you think of this whole like dualism versus complexity narrative that I'm throwing out there.
Yeah, it is that realization that, I mean, was one of my moments of clarity, was realizing like that dualism is just such a hard way to live. And that might be like the center of most people's epiphanies is like that contradiction to dualism, and realizing that there is more, and that most of the world exists in the middle and not on either or.
I mean, I agree with you, because it makes sense that that's how we're thinking, because our parents raise us, especially like as a child, you don't necessarily understand the complexities. And so your parents raise you with the dualism of, this is the right thing, do the right thing. Don't be bad, be good. Right. And so there's that dualism that you're raised on, because that's all parents can really teach at that level for most people.
Right.
But then as you get older, when you experience troubles on your own as an adult, or as just even a little bit older, that's where you start to understand complexities, is through the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that Jesus is like modeled from Jesus's message, is that Jesus comes in and is like, you guys have been you've tried to turn this into a right and wrong situation, and I'm coming to show you that God's kingdom is not about that. Like, the last shall be first. It doesn't make sense to you because you're thinking in this way. You are called to rest. You're not called to go. This doesn't make sense to you because you've been always taught that this is the good and this is the bad. But so I think that introduction from Jesus of this radical concept of the kingdom of God, where it's maybe it's not complexity, might not be the right word, but the kingdom of God is just a completely different concept from the world that we created. It's not,
like God is so much bigger than you could ever imagine. You can't put words to it.
Yeah, you can't put God in a dualistic way. And I think of that, it's when Ken comes in bringing the patriarchy to Barbie Land, it's the overcorrection from
and we do that all the time, don't
right?
we?
Absolutely.
And so it's like the basis of what he's trying to do is trying to, like what we've been saying all along, is like he's just trying to feel important, but he does so at the cost of the Barbies feeling important. And so it's not that patriarchy is the answer or matriarchy is the answer, but it's that neither is the answer. Everybody should just be able to be equal no matter what.
Yeah, and that's what it leads to is, so the trance is broken. All of these Barbies are waking up. And there's this funny battle scene that leads to the I'm Just Ken song, which is the best part of the movie. But honestly, that fight scene, when I was thinking about it, and I think it aligns with, Gracie, what you were just saying, is it makes me think of the infighting that we experience as a church of like, who's got it right? Who's interpreting it the right way? Which denomination is holding this up in reverence and which denomination is getting it wrong? And it just turns into all of this infighting among us. And then we just completely lose the plot.
They become distracted from they were
trying to accomplish.
And then they become distracted by their own insecurities, because like we were saying, patriarchy wasn't the answer. Like, it wasn't that it needed to be patriarchy, it's that they needed to be equal.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think so that leads into they have this huge fight scene. They get distracted. And while they're distracted, the Barbies come in and kind of put things back the way they were and take back control of the house and instill Barbie as presidents and judges and all of these things again. And the Kens are just deflated. They're like, well, what do we do now? The poor Kens. And then we start the theme of seeking forgiveness. And one of the things that really stood out to me after all of this happened is that seeking forgiveness is extremely messy. and it's not easy.
And it
For
doesn't-
anyone.
Yeah.
Like for the forgiver or for the forgiven. Like it's hard for everybody in that situation.
Yeah. And so they both Barbie and Ken finally come back together because stereotypical Barbie kind of acts as the voice for all the Barbies, and then stereotypical Ken acts as the voice for all of the Kens. And so what we're kind of seeing is like a reuniting and reconciliation between the two of them. And Barbie starts by apologizing to Ken, and she realizes she has this new self-awareness and empathy for him of like, I'm so sorry that I made you feel small. And it's a really big moment for Ken. And she's saying, you know, not every night had to be girls' night, you know, and she starts to see that there's more that she could have been doing. And so she's on this path to forgiveness by apologizing. But what does Ken do?
Sublime.
I think it's really interesting. Ken doesn't apologize.
Yeah.
You know? And
well, he takes it. He seems to take it as like, okay, then now we can be in love again.
yes,
And she was like, no.
He misunderstands, and I wrote that down. Barbie goes to Ken to resolve the conflict, and he perceives it as sexual advances and tries to kiss her.
Yeah.
He completely misunderstood what was happening. And it's just like, oh, things can go back to the way they were or the way I hoped they would be, because she never really let him kiss her. But, and so it's messy, and it can be misinterpreted and misunderstood. And
I think that's because, I mean, Ken had empathy for his other Kens. I mean, the main Ken had empathy for his other Kens, but I don't think he ever understood from Barbie's perspective of what was going on in the world, right? Even though he went from being feeling insignificant in original Barbie land and then feeling powerful, and then coming back, he's like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to get what I want, which is the love and affection from Barbie that I've been seeking the whole time. She's apologizing, which means I'm right, and I'm going to get love now from Barbie. That's how he saw it. He didn't see it as, well,
this is supposed to
Maybe
be a
I did
mutual-
something wrong
yeah.
too.
yeah. That's how he's, in my mind, watching him, that's what I thought.
Well, and I walked away from the movie the first time we saw it. I was frustrated. I was like, why didn't Ken apologize? That's what I wanted from this movie, is like, I wanted to hear an apology from Ken and feel like I got an apology on the behalf of the patriarchy. You know, like it was all about me, what I wanted to feel and what I wanted to hear. And I want that apology from Ken. But you know what? Forgiveness isn't fair.
Right.
Right.
And you're not always going to get the apology. And you have to learn how to
Not everyone's working with the
continue,
same
how to be able to
tools.
move on. Exactly. Say more about that.
Yeah. So not everyone's working with the same tools. It's a conversation that we've been getting into recently is, you know, some people, you know, will come to the realization that, hey, what's been going on to this point isn't necessarily working, but it's not like, and you're talking to somebody who was, let's say, theoretically a problem, but they don't necessarily see all of the angles that you're seeing. And so they think apology means I'm now getting what I want, as opposed to apology meaning what has happened is not okay, but I'm not trying to go the path that you're trying to go either. And so they don't have the tools to recognize the difference in terms of what your apology means. And so Ken thinks it's sexual advances when she's just saying, I'm sorry for the feelings that for what feelings you've had to go through at this point. But she's not saying, okay, what you want to do, Ken, let's do that now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was listening to a podcast the other day where someone was talking about.
There are other podcasts.
This is the only one I listen to.
Where do you think I get my material? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't listen to anything other than this.
No, so I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about like relationship with their parents, and they both had extremely gruff parents who were just kind of like of a generation where you don't apologize to your kids, you don't. And so they were talking about like how they've been in therapy and they're doing work, and they are trying to have conversations with their parents around apology and forgiveness, and it's just not going the way they want it to go. And so the host talked about how, you know, I had an experience with my dad that I went to him and I apologized to him. And I said, hey, Dad, I'm really sorry if I hurt you. Like, it seems like I might have hurt your feelings. And, kind of the same way that Barbie went to Ken. And then he got nothing back from his dad. And he called his dad out and said, Dad, you hurt my feelings too. Like, would you be willing to apologize to me? And his dad's reaction was something like, well, what do you think I do? Wake up every morning trying to hurt you? I'm your dad.
Yeah.
And the realization in that moment was that's as close to an apology as my dad can get.
Yeah.
Him saying, that's his way of saying, I've never intentionally tried to hurt you. I'm your father.
And I wouldn't
so intentionally try to hurt you.
Right.
He just can't quite get to the next step of I'm sorry for any harm I've unintentionally caused you.
Yeah.
But at least he's willing to say, I would never try to hurt you. Said it in a very aggressive, passive aggressive way. But it's kind of like the same thing from Ken. You made the joke about sublime.
Yeah.
But maybe that, when Barbie finally says like, hey, I want to spend some time with you. And he says sublime.
Sublime.
Maybe that's as close to an apology as we can get from Ken.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that was him acknowledging that, hey, what's been going on isn't the same as to what I want either, right? That's how I took the sublime of what's been before is not what I want now. So let's try to get to the better place now.
Yeah. And I think just learning to give a little extra grace to people and meeting people where they are. It's so difficult because we want, especially if you've done work, if you've been in therapy, if you're trying to increase your empathy and self-awareness, it can be really hard to be around people who aren't doing that work. And we have to remind ourselves, like, everybody's just working with the tools that they have and everybody is trying their best.
And you want them to have the tools that you have, but sometimes they just don't.
And they are enough.
They are Knuff. You are Knuff.
You are Knuff. And that's where our story wraps up, is Ken and Barbie start accepting their humanity, embracing the complexity. Barbie decides to take on the Birkenstocks forever and become fully human with everything that represents. No punishments are handed out. New realizations lead to a new way of doing things, where in Barbie Land, they start allowing the Kens in leadership roles. Weird Barbie becomes the head of sanitation. She's very excited about that.
It's been her dream.
And it's kind of...
It's all she's ever wanted.
It's kind of this happy ending of everybody gets to learn that they are loved and valued exactly as they are. And it feels like this message that is, you are created in the image of God. You are loved. You are worthy. You are valued. And you matter.
And it's everybody. It's
everybody.
Everyone.
It ends with every single person feeling like they matter.
Yeah.
One of the things that we didn't explicitly say is that she gets to visit the spirit of her creator again.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a really powerful part for me. That's kind of along the lines of that they are now, they realize who they are and who they get to love who they are. That the conversation that Barbie has with her creator is a really powerful one if you look at it from the lens of us, the creation having a moment with their creator and saying things to their creator like, I want to be this. And the creator saying, you go do it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so excited for you to do that. Like the delight that it brings the creator that Barbie wants. She's like, I don't want to be an idea. I want to make ideas. Like, I want to take part in the creation. And that's when the creator's like, go do it. Like, no, it's not going to be easy, but like, I want you to get to do that. And so it's like, that's that's one of the best representations I've seen of us getting to be co-creators with God. That since we're made in the image of God and God is a creator, then we too are creators, not the original, but we get to participate with God in creating. And God's like, yes, do it. Go for it. I'm with you. So that part is what brings me like the most joy as a pastor to see that part.
Well, and it makes me think of, it's true, like her absolute joy in her interaction with Barbie at the end of when she chooses to become fully human. It makes me think of one of the ways that Richard Rohr has described God as like God is a parent and we are God's children just creating art. And God puts every single thing we create proudly on the refrigerator and is so just enamored and in love with us. And even when it's a mess and we get it wrong and we drew the house upside down, God is like, oh my gosh, what a beautiful picture you drew. Look what you did. Look what you did.
I'm so proud of you.
Yes. And it's just this ultimate joy that we get to experience. And it's that co-creation of getting to be a part of the story. And there is still work to be done. There is still experiences to be had. And Barbie is like the end of the story is the beginning of the story, you know, and it's this cyclical. I mean, we could also get into the whole theme of death and resurrection, and resurrection. Like this whole story is just mentalities and certain ways of thinking and constructs and everything being put to death and new life and new creation coming out of it. And now you're part of the story. And you get to go to the gynecologist. That's what I put in my notes.
What a time.
Yeah. But this was really fun. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I took so many notes, and there are things that, oh man, we didn't even begin to cover. But suffice to say, I went and saw this movie in the theaters twice. It was, Gracie says 3 times for her.
Yeah.
It was I loved it. It was very impactful. One of the things, it just felt validating and it felt very human and restorative. So it's,
I will say I did that speech that America Ferrera gave or Gloria gave to explain the complexities was really powerful. Like even if you're not, I'm not a woman, but like listening to her give that speech felt so powerful to like help understand what it is someone else is going through. And so like for me, it was feeling empathy for her and for what Barbie was going through in that moment. And so I took it from that people are going through that is really tough. And just to remember that you don't know someone else's lived experiences. So just try to remain empathetic for them.
I didn't even ask you, like, from the masculine perspective, specifically, like how this movie hit you.
Well, I mean, I guess for me, I saw Barbie Land as having some matriarchal elements, right? So it was a matriarchy where it was run by the women in a way that I see that women in our society can be ignored a lot of times, is how Ken was being ignored in Barbie Land. And so when America Ferrera was expressing to Barbie what it was that she was experiencing, that to me, I was like, oh man, that's what women are going through. That's tough.
See, because for me, it was like a sisterhood movie of like, oh, somebody is vocalizing the things that I've been feeling and I feel validated and I feel like I'm not crazy. Like it isn't just me that's feeling all of these heavy expectations, you know?
In
and
dichotomous
I'm not
ways.
even a mom. Like put motherhood on top of that and I'm just like, I'm out.
And it's just in so many different ways you're getting pulled constantly. And then for that realization to come, it was just crazy.
Well, I think that there are a ton of spiritual themes in this movie. And so I think the answer is, yeah, we can learn about God from the Barbie movie.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank y'all so much for joining me. And hopefully we'll be able to get together for another podcast soon.
Yeah.
Bye, Alan.
Bye, Barbie.
Bye, Barbie.
Bye, Barbie. Bye, Alan.
Bye, Barbie.
The Life Plus God podcast is hosted, written, and produced by me, Alyssa Robinson, and sponsored by Treach Memorial United Methodist Church in Flower Mound, Texas. If you live in the Flower Mound area, I invite you to stop by and see if Treach could be your new church family. You can learn more about all of our programs and events at tmumc.org, and I hope to catch you next week for our next episode of the Life Plus God podcast.